It was supposed to be the kind of Sunday that people frame in photos. The sky a gentle canvas of blue, the woods alive with the scent of pine and warm earth, and laughter drifting over the nearby Stillwater Creek. The Arnish family had left, home around 11 a.m. with a checkered picnic basket, to bikes strapped to the back of their pale green station wagon, and the children bouncing in the back seat, excited for a day in nature. By evening, they were gone. David Arnish was a respected high school biology teacher, quiet, measured, and obsessively punctual. His wife, Miriam, worked part-time at the local bookstore and was known for her bright scarves and soft-spoken grace. Their 2 children, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Aaron, were as adored by the community as they were by their teachers. So, when they didn't return home that Sunday night, no one panicked, not at first. Beth Granger, Miriam's younger sister, called 3 times the next morning. No answer. By evening, she was sitting on the front porch of their tidy house on Hollow Pines Road. Keys clutched in her palm, heart pounding. "Their car's not here," she whispered. Peering through the window, the blinds were still half open, dishes in the sink, the kids' backpacks by the door. Nothing looked off, except for their absence. A too perfect stillness. She called 911, "My sister. She didn't come back from a picnic. They were supposed to be home by now. It's been a whole day. This isn't like them." The officer on the line was calm, procedural. Missing person reports weren't usually filed within 48 hours. But something in Beth's voice, the tremble, the restrained panic, convinced them to send someone over. By Tuesday morning, the Arnish home was swarming with police and neighbors. Search parties spread through the woods. Helicopters circled the creek area. There was no wreckage, no cell signal, no campfire smoke. Nothing. Beth sat alone in the children's bedroom, clinging to Lily's stuffed bunny. It's formatted and warm from her grip. She hadn't cried yet. She felt dry inside, as if grief hadn't found room to enter, because confusion had claimed all the space. "I was just here Friday," she said aloud to no one. Miriam made lemon tea. "We laughed about that dumb TV show." And now, her voice cracked. Detective Quinn, the lead investigator, had asked her if the couple had any problems, marital strain, debts, affairs. Beth had flinched. They were normal, she'd said quietly. Miriam sometimes looked tired. That's all. But something tugged at her memory now. Miriam's eyes that Friday night, too wide behind her teacup. Her smile had lingered too long. Her fingers had trembled slightly. Beth hadn't asked. Now it was all she could think about. By the end of the second week, the flyers were fading in the summer sun. Tips slowed. The press moved on. The case, while still officially open, was beginning to rot at its core. One officer whispered in passing, "They probably got lost, or just ran." Beth didn't believe it. Miriam would never leave without saying goodbye, not to her, not to anyone. And David, he was too proud, too careful. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her chest like a stone that wouldn't dissolve. She drove home that night, gripping the wheel, barely noticing the road. When she passed the Hollow Pines neighborhood sign, she glanced back once. Their house was still lit, porch light flickering like a heartbeat that didn't know it had stopped. The next morning, she would return with a spare key and go inside. And in that still, untouched silence, she would find the first crack. Beth returned to the Arnish home just after sunrise, the sky a bruised gray. She parked on the curb, staring at the pale green siding and white-trimmed windows. Everything looked exactly the same, and yet nothing felt familiar. She unlocked the front door with the spare key Miriam kept taped behind the birdhouse. The hinges groaned as she stepped inside. The scent hit her first, not decay, but stillness. A sealed quiet, like the air hadn't moved in days. The kind of silence that breathes down your neck. The coffee pot on the counter was half full. A pale film clung to the top, unmoving. The laundry basket sat under the stairs, filled with damp towels. Miriam had a habit of folding laundry while the kids played outside. A yellow t-shirt was mid-fold. Beth's breath caught. She moved toward the hallway. The back door was unlocked, not wide open, just slightly ajar. A soft wind drifted in, rustling the paper on the fridge. A shopping list hung there, milk, Band-Aids, Lily's school shoes. She turned. Her eyes landed on the basement door. It was closed, but something was near it. Small, out of place, a single red child's shoe. Left foot. Tiny, facing the door like it had been placed, not dropped. Beth backed away. An hour later, the police arrived. Yellow tape, gloves, cameras. The official machine beginning to grind. Detective Quinn stepped onto the porch and adjusted the collar of his raincoat. He was in his early 40s, with storm gray eyes and a face carved by too many midnight cases. He had been quiet when Beth spoke, but attentive, scribbling notes as if looking for a crack in her calm. "Miss Granger," he said gently, standing just outside the kitchen. "You're sure no one else has been in here since Sunday?" "No. One. Just me. Just now." He nodded. "We'll need you to wait outside while the team sweeps the house." Beth didn't argue. She just stepped out, arms wrapped around herself, watching the screen door sway slightly behind her inside. Detective Quinn walked the rooms methodically. The living room was untouched. Blankets folded, remote on the couch, a half-finished puzzle. On the coffee table, a family in mid-motion, frozen dot in the hallway. He paused. The shoe by the basement. He crouched. "Tag this," he said to the officer behind him, "and get a print kit." The officer shook his head a few minutes later. Nothing. Not a single fingerprint on the doorknob. Not even the family's. "It's been wiped." Quinn looked down the stairs into the pitch-dark basement. "Do we have power?" "Yeah, but the light switch doesn't work. Could be cut." Quinn hesitated, then descended slowly with a flashlight. Dust hovered in the beam like ash. The basement was clean, disturbingly so. Just boxes, a few stored toys, and a mattress wrapped in plastic against the far wall. He swept the light across the floor. No blood. No signs of a struggle. And yet, something was wrong. The air was too cold. He turned, eyes landing on the wall near the stairwell. A small handprint, faint, as if made in condensation, glistened for just a second before fading. When Quinn stepped back outside, Beth stood, stiff as stone. "Well?" she asked. He shook his head. No signs of forced entry. No signs of life either. Beth looked past him, to the windows. "You ever see a house pretend nothing happened?" Quinn didn't answer. He just turned toward his car. Behind him, the wind picked up. The red shoe tipped over and rolled gently toward the basement door, resting against it. The next day, Quinn would return, not as a detective, but as a man who couldn't sleep, to look again, because something in that house was hiding. Beth returned home that night, but sleep didn't follow. She sat on the floor of her kitchen with the lights off, her back against the cabinet, legs pulled to her chest. Outside, the wind rattled the garbage bins, but inside, only the sound of her shallow breaths filled the space. Miriam had once braided Beth's hair every morning before school. When their mother got sick, Miriam became the caretaker, the shield. Strong, capable, always knowing what to say. Now she was gone, and Beth could feel the town forgetting her already. It had been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of search grids and patrol cars, of news cameras and sound bites, and now quiet. Quinn had stopped returning calls as quickly. The search parties had dwindled. People were moving on. Beth was in single quotes T. She showed up at the station on Friday morning, unannounced. Her voice was calm, as she waited in the lobby, fingers tapping against her jeans in a rapid, nervous rhythm. When Detective Quinn finally appeared, his sleeves were rolled up and his tie was askew. He looked tired. "Miss Granger," he said, not unkindly, "we're still going through new leads. We'll call if we need you." "That's the problem," she interrupted, standing. "You don't need me. You don't need anyone. You're letting them fade." He blinked, caught off guard. "Beth," he said carefully, "I understand you're grieving, but these things take time. She's not a thing," Beth snapped. "She's my sister, her kids. You haven't even looked into David's past, have you?" "We did a preliminary check. Nothing jumped out." "Do it again," she said, stepping closer, her voice trembling. "Dig deeper. You think people just vanish into the woods without reason. Someone did this. Someone planned this." Quinn sighed and motioned her into a private room. The air was heavy, sterile, suffocating. "I've been doing this a long time," he said, sitting across from her. "And sometimes, people don't want to be found." Beth stared at him. Her heart knocked loudly in her chest. "You think?" "They ran. I think we can't rule it out." She stood abruptly. "Then rule it out." "Because my sister wouldn't. Not with the kids. And not without telling me." Quinn remained seated, but something flickered behind his eyes. A pause. A reconsideration. "David ever mention any debts, arguments, old enemies?" Beth hesitated. He had a falling out with his uncle years ago. Some kind of property fight after his father died. But Miriam never told me much. She hated drama. "Name's Randall Arnish. He lived upstate. Died last year, I think." David said the family stopped speaking to him after that fight. Quinn scribbled it down. "Okay, I'll reassign someone to pull up records." Beth's breath loosened slightly, but the air still felt thin. Later, as she left the station, her hand hovered over the doorknob. She glanced back at Quinn through the glass. He had already turned away, buried in paperwork again. The world was still moving. Hers was not. That night, she took out a dusty box from her closet, one of Miriam's old journals she had rescued from their childhood home after their mother passed. Inside, between pages of scribbled recipes and song lyrics, she found a photo tucked near the back. It showed David, younger, bearded, wearing a different smile than Beth remembered, with a woman who wasn't Miriam. Her eyes had been scratched out with pen dot, and on the back, written in faint ink, "Tell her the truth or I will." Beth had stared at the photo for hours the night she found it in the journal. Something about the scratch marks, how violently they tore across the woman's eyes, made her stomach twist, and the handwriting, "Tell her the truth or I will." It had been 10 months since the Arnish family disappeared. 10 months since the backyard search teams disbanded, the media stopped calling, and Detective Quinn's visits slowed to once every few weeks. Beth had not stopped. That morning, she drove out to the Arnish house alone. It had been quiet for months, frozen in legal limbo, with no one daring to buy or even rent it. The neighbors avoided looking at it. Even the air around the porch felt heavier, like the house remembered. The key still worked. The same silence greeted her as she stepped inside. "Just one more sweep," she whispered. "Just one more time." The house was dusty now. Cobwebs hung in corners. The kitchen faucet leaked in slow, rhythmic drops. She didn't touch much. Didn't want to disturb anything until she reached the pantry. The cookbook shelf stood untouched. Miriam had collected dozens over the years, often stuffing them with sticky notes and handwritten tweaks. Beth pulled down the thickest one, New England Home Suppers, and opened it at random. Something fluttered to the floor, a photo, creased and curled at the edges. David stood in the center of the frame, arms around a woman with shoulder-length, dark hair and a deep red blouse. The photo had been taken at night, string lights glowing in the background. It looked like a party, maybe a backyard, but the woman's eyes had been viciously scratched out. Beth turned the photo over. The same handwriting, "Tell her the truth or I will." A chill ran down her spine. She grabbed the photo, the cookbook, and raced to the attic. The Arnishes had stored old boxes up there, forgotten toys, holiday decorations, tax papers. She hadn't gone up in months. The narrow ladder groaned under her weight as she climbed. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight. She sifted through the boxes quickly at first, then slower, more deliberately. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, only that something had been missed. And then she found it, a plain cardboard box labeled Randall, legal, Randall Arnish, David's estranged uncle, the one Beth had mentioned to Quinn almost a year ago. Inside were old letters, documents, a property deed. But what caught her eye was a folded paper tucked behind a file, a photocopied ID, the same woman from the scratched photo. Her name, Elaine M. Calloway. Elaine. Beth whispered, saying it out loud for the first time. One of the letters, dated 1989, was from Randall, addressed to David. "You're making a mistake. She's unstable. If this gets out, you'll lose everything." Beth's throat tightened. Who was Elaine? What did David have to lose? She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she showed the photo to Quinn. He studied it quietly. Then, "That's not Miriam. Do you know who she is?" "Her name's Elaine Calloway." She was involved with David, maybe before Miriam. How do you know? Beth hesitated. Not for sure, but someone wanted Miriam to know the truth. Someone who hated being silent. Quinn's jaw tightened. I'll run the name. See if she's still alive. Beth looked out the window. The sky was turning gray again. If she is, she said softly, she might be the last person who saw them alive. Detective Quinn sat in his car across from the old Manchester School District building, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. He hadn't told Beth he was driving out here. Not yet. He wanted to know who David Arnish had been before the family, before the house on Hollow Pines Road, before Miriam. According to the records, David had taught at Talmadge High for 5 years before abruptly resigning in 1989. The same year Elaine Calloway had appeared in the old photograph. Quinn stepped inside the building and was greeted by the scent of old carpet and copy toner. A retired administrator named Paul Lenner met him in the break room. With 2 paper cups of lukewarm coffee. David? Paul asked, squinting at the name. Yeah, I remember him. Quiet guy. Kept to himself. Did he leave on his own terms? Quinn asked. Paul laughed. Not exactly. It was a bit of a mess. He leaned in, voice lowering. Word was, he got tangled up in some family drama. There was an inheritance issue after his father died. Property, cash, a cabin upstate. David was supposed to get a portion, but something didn't add up. Randall, his uncle, contested it. There were accusations, forged paperwork. Nothing criminal, but enough to make people uncomfortable. Was he fired? Technically, no. But let's just say he was encouraged to resign before things got uglier. Quinn left the building with a cold, dull ache settling in his chest. When he called Beth that evening, her voice was tense. What did you find? David's past isn't clean. There was an alleged forgery connected to his father's will. Randall challenged it. It nearly split the family. And the cabin mentioned. In the dispute, it still exists. In Randall's name. Beth went silent. Are you saying David lied to Miriam? I'm saying he might have built their entire life on something stolen. Beth sat on her couch, her fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in over an hour. Her mind replayed every moment. David fixing the porch. David reading to Aaron on the living room rug. David laughing over burnt toast. How much of it had been real? She remembered Miriam's distant stares, the quiet silences that never felt quite natural, like she was always holding something back. Do you think Miriam knew? Beth asked. If she did, she may have stayed quiet to protect the kids, or herself. That night, Beth returned to the attic. She rummaged back through the box labeled Randall, legal, looking for anything that could point her toward the cabin Quinn had mentioned. And there it was, a map, folded tightly and wedged between 2 manila folders, hand-drawn, worn. At the edges, a small red X marked a clearing near Stillwater Ridge, about 90 miles north of town, that she traced her finger along the route. Something about the hand-drawn path, the arrow-labeled clearing entrance behind Pine Grove, made her heart drop into her stomach that she snapped a photo and sent it to Quinn. Do you see this? She wrote, Stillwater Ridge. Could this be where they were going that Sunday? He called her 2 minutes later. Beth, we searched the park near the creek. We never searched that far out. The ridge is private land. David would have known that. If it was his family's old property, then he'd know how to hide something there. There was a pause on the line. I'm heading up first thing tomorrow, Quinn said. Don't tell anyone, not yet. Beth closed the attic door and leaned against it, the photo of the cabin still glowing on her screen. Suddenly, the lies felt closer than ever. The morning after discovering the map, Detective Quinn drove north toward Stillwater Ridge. The road narrowed into winding gravel paths as thick pine forests closed in on both sides. The cabin's site was still miles away, but he planned to hike there once the daylight broke. He stopped at a rundown gas station just off the main road, the last outpost before the woods swallowed everything. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The place smelled of oil, coffee, and decades of cigarette smoke. Help ya? Came a raspy voice from behind the counter. An older man, wearing a grease-stained vest and an oxygen tube in his nose, looked up from his paper. Quinn flashed his badge. Detective Quinn, looking into an old missing persons case. The Arnish family from Hollow Pines Road. You remember anything strange from that weekend back in '92? The man blinked. Arnish, yeah, quiet folks. To little kids, right? That's them. The man rubbed his chin. You know, I didn't think much of it at the time, but that Saturday night, I closed up late. Around midnight, I saw a black truck pull into the lot across from their street. Quinn leaned forward. Did you see who was in it? Driver. Stayed inside for a while, then got out, walked to the Arnish house. Didn't knock, just opened the gate and went to the side door. You sure it was their house? Positive. I used to walk my dog down that road every night. Quinn's voice tightened. Then what? The man hesitated. He leaned in close to her. She came out, stood under the porch light, and he kissed her. Not on the forehead, the mouth. Brief, but not nothing. Her, yeah, the woman. Brown hair, scarf. Looked like the pictures they used on the news. I didn't know she was missing yet. Thought it was just some secret thing. Did you see the man's face? Nah. Ball cap, gloves, moved like he knew he shouldn't be seen. Got back in the truck and drove off toward the woods. Quinn stood still, heart THUDDING. Miriam. Not just a wife, not just a mother, someone with secrets. He pulled out the photograph Beth had found, the one with David and the woman who wasn't Miriam. Did the man look anything like him? The gas station owner shook his head. Couldn't say. Might have. He was tall, moved like he had a limp, wore gloves. That's what stuck with me. Why gloves? Middle of summer, the man said. No one wears gloves in August unless they've got something to hide. That night, Quinn sat alone in his motel room, staring at the wall, the picture of Miriam in his mind. The loyal wife, the mother, the victim, was starting to fracture. Had she been trying to leave David? Had she trusted someone else, someone dangerous? Quinn called Beth. Beth, did Miriam ever mention feeling watched? Anyone unusual around the house? No. Why? He told her everything. The man at the gas station had said. There was a pause. I don't know who that man could be, she whispered. But Miriam, she never kissed anyone in public. She was private, scared of rumors. If someone saw her like that, she must have trusted him. Quinn stared at the map again. Maybe she trusted the wrong man. As they hung up, Beth stared out her window, thinking about something Miriam had once said years ago. If something ever happens to me, she'd whispered one night after too much wine. Just remember, I didn't fall into it. I walked in with my eyes open. And now Beth was beginning to understand what that meant. August 2002, Hollow Pines. Texas field behind Hollow Pines Elementary had been forgotten for years. Once used for family picnics and school field days, it had grown wild, thorny. Bushes swallowed the benches, and yellow weeds clawed at the sky. The Arnish family used to frequent that place, back when the town still believed in summer fairs and community potlucks. But now, the land was being cleared. It was part of a community volunteer project, new track field, better drainage. Dozens of parents, teachers, and children gathered with gloves and garbage bags, hacking away at the brush with clippers and rusty shovels. That's when 10-year-old Danny Whitaker found the toy. Miss Parker, he shouted, waving something above his head. I found a dinosaur. He held up a small, weathered plastic stegosaurus, caked in mud. Its tail was broken, and one eye was gouged out. But its color, a faded orange with a green stripe, was still visible. Miss Parker took it gently, inspecting the toy with faint surprise. It didn't look new. That evening, while cleaning out her truck, she noticed something familiar. She'd seen that toy before, in an old news segment about the Arnish disappearance. Curious, she drove home and searched online. It didn't take long. A grainy family photo from a 1991 picnic popped up. The twin girls, Sophie and Leah, sitting on a blanket. Between them sat an orange stegosaurus. Her heart sank. The next morning, Miss Parker called the sheriff's department. I think I found something from that missing family, the Arnishes. Detective Quinn hadn't been assigned to the original case, but he knew it cold. When he got the call, he drove down within the hour. He met Miss Parker at the site. The toy was waiting on a clean napkin like some fragile artifact. This is it. he murmured, comparing it to a black and white photo in the case file. This exact toy was listed in the original inventory. It went missing with the girls. They cordoned off the area immediately. Forensics arrived within the day, scraping soil, scanning with ground-penetrating radar, cataloging fragments, a shoelace, a piece of rusted metal, a baby blue button. It was as if the earth had tried to forget and failed. The town buzzed within hours. After 10 years of silence, the Arnish case was officially reopened. Some were relieved, others deeply unsettled. Beth Arnish heard the news on her way to pick up groceries. She pulled over and sat in her car, staring at the dashboard. Her hands trembled. It was just a toy, she whispered aloud, but the weight in her chest said otherwise. Memories came rushing back, the sound of her niece's giggling, the last phone call with Miriam, the cold dread that had never fully left Dot at the sheriff's office. Quinn opened the sealed case files again. The toy shifted the entire narrative. The original search had focused around the house and the nearby forest, but the picnic field had never been searched in depth. They'd assumed the family never made it that far, but maybe they had. He returned to the gas station, hoping the old man remembered more. That night, Quinn asked, "The truck, which direction did it drive when it left the Arnish house?" The old man squinted. "Toward the school, I think. Toward that picnic field." Quinn's heart dropped. The pieces were moving again. And someone, whoever drove that truck, had been there, had followed them. As Quinn stared out at the dug-up field, a thought gripped him. If a child's toy could survive a decade beneath the dirt, what else might be buried out there? Waiting, the toy in the field had reopened more than a cold case. It had awakened something buried deep in hollow pines. Detective Quinn didn't sleep much that week. The case files sprawled across his desk like a second life. He kept circling. Back to a detail from 1991, the property once owned by David Arnish's estranged uncle. Randall Hale, a man who lived alone, died of a stroke in '94 and left behind a crumbling two-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. It had been searched, superficially, back then, but not after the toy was found, not after everything they knew had begun to unravel. By Thursday, Quinn had a search warrant in hand and a flashlight clipped to his belt. He drove out alone. The Hale property had the look of a place forgotten on purpose. Overgrown vines clawed up the porch posts. A rusted mailbox hung sideways, filled with nests and mold. The house creaked when he stepped inside. Dust hung like mist. The living room was bare except for an overturned chair and a broken lamp. But it was the smell, faint mildew mixed with something else, something sour, that tightened his stomach. He moved methodically through the house, kitchen, bedroom, pantry. Nothing out of place, nothing recent. Then he found the cellar door. It was tucked behind the pantry shelf, slightly ajar but heavy with disuse. A rusted padlock dangled from the handle, snapped open. He hesitated. The stairs groaned under his weight as he descended. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. He reached the bottom and froze. The beam of his flashlight landed on a nest of objects. Small shoes, scuffed and child-sized, set neatly by the wall. Food wrappers, fruit snacks, crackers, dried apple chips were piled in a corner, long expired. A moldy sleeping bag lay flattened against the dirt floor, but the worst part was on the far wall. A picture frame, shattered, its photo missing, and, beside it, taped to the concrete with yellowed strips of masking tape, was a child's drawing. For stick figures. To tall ones, to small. One of the small ones was scribbled out with furious black strokes. Quinn's breath caught in his throat. He moved closer, crouching to study the drawing. Each figure had a crude smile. The smallest had a pink dress, roughly colored in. The name Leah was scrawled above it. The other girls said Sophie, above the adults, Momi, and Dady, but Leah was the one crossed out. Something sharp curled in his gut. He radioed it in. Within an hour, crime scene tape surrounded the house. Forensics teams moved in like ghosts, brushing soil, lifting fingerprints, scanning for any trace of DNA. News didn't take long to leak. The town buzzed again, with fear this time. Had someone from Hollow Pines done this? And how long had that cellar been occupied? A search of the property revealed more strange details. Nails bent inward on the inside of the cellar door, a plastic bag filled with hair ties, faded coloring books tucked beneath floorboards. Beth Arnish was called to identify the shoes and drawing. She stood in the cellar, trembling. "Those are theirs," she whispered. "Those are my niece's shoes. Leah's favorite color was pink. That's her." She collapsed into Quinn's arms. As she sobbed, Quinn's eyes drifted to the child's, drawing again, for stick figures, one erased, three left behind, and a single word scribbled in red crayon in the bottom corner: "Help." Whoever had been here wasn't just hiding. They had been kept, and someone, somewhere, still knew why. Beth Arnish hadn't opened her mail in days. Since the cellar discovery, she barely slept. The shoes, the drawing, the word help, it all churned inside her like a storm with no eye. She was pouring cold coffee into the sink when the doorbell rang. A package sat on her porch. No name, no return address, just her own written neatly across the middle: Beth Arnish. She brought it inside, hands trembling as she sliced the tape open. Inside was a worn leather diary, the kind her sister Miriam used to carry. A faded sticker still clung to the front, a cracked daisy, the petals worn away. Beth sat on the floor. The diary's early pages were full of small, swirling handwriting, shopping lists, birthday plans, scribbled poetry, the names of her girls written over and over. But then, the ink changed. Red. The final pages were filled with jagged letters, frantic slants, and desperate loops. Miriam's voice, frozen in ink. August 5, 1995. It's been 143 days since I last saw the sun. The girls think we're on a long vacation. They don't ask about school anymore. They don't ask about him either. Beth's throat tightened. August 12. Checks the locks every night. Then he counts the food. I pretend to sleep while he does it. He talks to himself now. Says no one misses us. Says if I ever try to run, you'll end up like the last one. I think he's done this before. Beth's hand clutched the diary tighter. She flipped forward, faster now. August 24. Leah asked me why the sky is just pretend. I didn't know how to answer. Then came the last page, written slowly, with smeared streaks. August 30. Said he'd kill us if I ever left. But I have to try. I have to try. If someone finds this, I tried. Beth couldn't breathe. The words swam before her eyes. There was no signature, but it didn't need one. Every loop, every tilt of the letters belonged to Miriam. She pressed the diary to her chest and rocked on the floor like she had the night the girls disappeared, like she had for years in silence. She had blamed her sister. She had buried her with resentment. But Miriam hadn't abandoned them. She'd been trapped, and she had fought. Beth took the diary to the station. Detective Quinn read through it in a quiet room while forensics dusted the package for prints. He looked up slowly, eyes shadowed. She was trying to leave him. Beth nodded, voice hollow, and he wouldn't let her. There was a long silence. The room felt cold, even in the summer heat. "Who sent this?" Quinn finally asked. Beth shook her head. "I don't know." The envelope had no fingerprints, no traceable marks. The post office confirmed it had been dropped in a rural mailbox to towns over. A dead end, or a warning, or both. Quinn placed the diary carefully in an evidence bag. She left breadcrumbs, and now someone's making sure we find them. Outside, the wind picked up. A storm was building. Beth stood on the sidewalk, clutching her coat closed. She remembered a story Miriam once told her as kids, about wolves, who wore silence like a second skin. How you'd never hear them coming until their breath was already on your neck. That night, Beth couldn't shake the feeling. Someone was watching again. The news came the next morning, brittle and cold. Detective Quinn called Beth at 6:17 a.m. She didn't answer. She was sitting in her kitchen, staring at Miriam's diary. The same last sentence looping through her mind. "If someone finds this, I tried." The phone buzzed again. This time, she picked up. "Beth," Quinn said, "we found something." Behind the cabin, she drove out to the woods, gravel cracking beneath her tires. Same cabin, same wind sighing through the trees like it was trying to speak. But this time, it was what lay behind the cabin that mattered. A dry well, half collapsed, hidden by vines and thyme. The wooden planks once nailed across its mouth were shattered. One had been pried loose, as if by desperate hands. Quinn didn't say it, but Beth knew this was no accident. Someone had buried a secret here. She stepped closer. The forensic team was just emerging with the last of the remains. 3 sets of bones. A woman, a man, a child. Beth felt her body go numb. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Quinn nodded slowly. "Dental records confirm it. Miriam, David, and one of the girls." Beth turned away, covering her mouth. Her legs nearly gave out. "Not all of them, not both, not Leah and Eli." "Which child?" she managed to ask, her voice raw. The answer came, gently, but it still shattered her. Leah. Beth sank to the ground beside a dying patch of wildflowers. Leah had been the quiet one, the one who always stayed near her mother, drawing stars in notebooks and whispering secrets in the dark. And now gone, buried in a pit like garbage. But Eli, her little boy with wild curls and muddy shoes, his bones were not there. Beth stood, wiping her face. Her grief had nowhere to go, folding into anger. "Then where's Eli?" Quinn looked grim. "There's no trace of him, no blood, no signs of struggle, just nothing." The possibility sat like ice in her chest. Had he escaped? Had Miriam sacrificed herself and Leah to get Eli out? Or had someone taken him specifically? "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why leave one?" Quinn didn't answer. No one could. The team cordoned off the area. Evidence bags lined a folding table. Among them, Miriam's cracked glasses, a rusted locket, David's wallet with a faded ID, and a piece of cloth, a child's sweater sleeve, red and torn, caught in a root near the edge of the well. Beth reached for it instinctively but stopped. She remembered that sweater. Eli had worn it on their last birthday together. "Who buried them here?" she said. Quinn exhaled. "The same person who's been hiding this for years." Beth's mind raced. The diary had surfaced after the cellar was found. Someone was pushing breadcrumbs to the surface. But why now? And why not all the truth at once? "Someone's watching," she said aloud. "Someone wants us to find this, bit by bit." Quinn nodded slowly. "And they're not done." Beth looked at the dark mouth of the well. What secrets had these woods swallowed? She felt it deep in her bones. This wasn't the end. That night, she dreamed of Miriam again. But this time, Miriam wasn't crying. She was pointing toward a small door, hidden, wooden, and painted yellow. Beth woke with a gasp, her hands shaking. She didn't know where that door was, but she knew it mattered. The dream lingered long after. Beth woke. Miriam pointing toward the yellow door. It stayed with her like a riddle half solved. She told Quinn, and they combed through property records, traced old floor plans, searched for hidden compartments in the cabin and beneath. But no door was found. Then, the days fell into silence again. Weeks passed. Leaves began to turn. The town's morning stretched like fog over the hills. Some lit candles on their porches for the Arnish family. Others didn't speak of them at all, as if silence could seal the horror away. Beth had nearly stopped hoping. Then, on a wind-cut morning in early October, the call came from a parish in Lanebrook, a town 70 miles east. A boy had been found. He'd been dropped off on the stone steps of St. Agnes Church just before sunrise. The priest thought he was 15, maybe 16, thin, quiet, pale as the frost that covered the grass around him. He said his name was Aaron. When the local officers questioned him, he didn't say much. He didn't know his last name, didn't know where he was from, just that he remembered a basement with blue walls, a soft voice singing lullabies in the dark. Her name, he said, slowly, was Miriam. Beth's breath caught when Quinn told her. She didn't want to hope, not again. But the boy's DNA confirmed what his broken voice couldn't say. Aaron was Elijah Arnish, the missing twin, the boy who was supposed to be bones in the bottom of a dry well. Beth went with Quinn to meet him. The boy sat in the quiet room of a foster center, wearing a donated sweatshirt too big for him, sleeves swallowed by his hands. He was taller than she expected, nearly a man. But his eyes were the same gray-blue as Miriam's, and when he smiled, it was David's mouth. "Do you remember me?" she asked softly. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You made pancakes, he said, with blueberries. I hated the skin. Beth's eyes filled with tears. He remembered. But what else did he remember? Not much. At first, time had tangled inside him. He spoke in fragments, shadows. He said a man took him to the mountains. A small house, a woman who brushed his hair, but never looked him in the eye. Nights spent in silence. No school, no birthdays. No name. Sometimes he said I wasn't allowed to cry, Aaron whispered. He said my mom was selfish, that she ran away and left me behind. Beth felt her throat close. It had been abduction. But more than that, warped captivity. A mind rewritten through fear and control. Do you remember the night? She asked. The night, in the woods. He stared out the window for a long time. Then finally, he said, I remember my sister. She held my hand. We were hiding. Beth held herself still. She told me not to make a sound. That if I was quiet, he wouldn't find me. A long pause. She let go. That was all. The room was silent. Grief and relief warred inside Beth. Miriam had saved her son, at the cost of herself, and of Leah. The town held a candlelight vigil the following weekend. For Miriam, for David, for Leah, for the years stolen. Hundreds came. And when Aaron, or Elijah, as Beth called him now, lit the first candle, the wind didn't blow it out. But still, the questions remained. Who had taken him? And why had they released him now, after all these years? Later that night, Beth sat with Elijah as he drew in a notebook, scribbled lines, shadows. He paused and looked up. There was a yellow door, he said suddenly, in the house, locked from the outside. Beth's heart stopped. Do you remember what was behind it? He nodded. Double quotes. There were more kids. The moment Elijah said it, there were more kids. The air in the room seemed to shift. Beth sat frozen in her chair, staring at him. Elijah had returned to his drawing like he hadn't just dropped a match into a barn full of dry hay. More kids, she asked softly. He nodded. 3, maybe 4. I don't know their names. One of them, she cried a lot. Beth glanced at Quinn, who was already standing. He reached for his phone. This wasn't over. This wasn't finished. There was a yellow door. There were other children, and someone had locked it from the outside. Elijah remembered more in the days that followed. The house was small, with rotting steps and a red metal roof. It sat on a hill surrounded by fields. No neighbors, no traffic, no mail, no phone, no clocks. The man, he never called himself anything. He rarely spoke at all, and when he did, it was a whisper. He said we were his second chance. Elijah told the investigators. He said we didn't matter before, but now we did. A statewide alert was issued. Satellite imaging and drone searches cross-referenced Elijah's memories with geographical data. And then, just north of the old forest line, they found it. A house with no neighbors. Law enforcement raided the property at dawn. What they discovered was worse than any of them had prepared for. The place reeked of mildew and rust. The furniture was child-sized. The windows were boarded from the outside. In the basement, they found drawings, hundreds, taped to the walls, stick figures, trees, fire, a woman with long hair, a man with no face, but the children were gone. Every room was empty. No beds, no clothes, no signs of struggle, just emptiness, clean to the point of deliberate. The yellow door Elijah remembered, still there, steel reinforced, locked, and inside, a padded room with claw marks on the walls. Quinn stood in that room for a long time, fists clenched at his sides. Beth, when she saw the photos later, vomited into the sink. Elijah hadn't lied. Someone had been there. Someone had cleaned it out. 2 weeks later, police found an old security camera hidden inside a power box on the property's edge. Footage recovered showed 2 vehicles arriving in the middle of the night, just 5 days before the raid. 3 adults. For children, no plates, no faces, just shadows and urgency. They left in silence and never came back. The case was declared part of a larger trafficking investigation, one with connections stretching across counties, maybe states. The FBI stepped in. Files were sealed, names redacted, but Beth kept fighting. She and Quinn formed a foundation in Miriam's name, the Yellow Door Project, dedicated to locating children who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. They shared Elijah's story. They gathered volunteers, raised money, held town hall meetings. And slowly, people started coming forward. A woman in Nevada remembered a silent boy she babysat once, who was taken away in a van. A trucker in Arkansas described a rest stop where a man warned him not to look in the back. A janitor from Colorado mailed Beth a handwritten note. "I saw the yellow door. I know where another one is." The story was no longer just Miriam's. It belonged to all of them. Elijah began to heal, slowly. He chose to keep both names, Elijah for his mother, Aaron for the boy who had survived. He started school the next fall. Small steps, soft smiles. He still didn't like blueberries. Sometimes, Beth found him staring out windows for long stretches. When she asked what he was thinking, he always said the same thing. "Are they safe? Not am I safe. Not are we safe, are they?" Because deep inside, he knew what it felt like to be locked behind a yellow door and wonder if anyone would ever find you.